sold, I think, about 30 copies, that's all. All right, let's talk about, I think probably we've exhausted our luck here. There are about another 100 photographs. You can?
747.
Is that all you got?
There should be about as much again. Well, let's go on, let's talk about that. All right, 100 miles away, further north, in the city of Amsterdam, there is the Rijksmuseum, Holland's national collection. Predominantly Dutch painting. Let's put, while I'm talking, can you put this other screensaver on we talked about? Oh, no, for that. Whilst I'm talking, I'm going to give you something to look at apart from looking at me. It is a sort of screensaver of some of the basic material that was reworked in the Rijksmuseum. There is a policy in Holland to try to make, and I think Wolfgang's already touched on this, a notion that the great heritage of Europe should be made, very sensibly, a living thing for contemporary audiences in the year 2006. The Rijksmuseum itself is going through a renovation, so there are particular good reasons why they could do it at this particular time. The center of the whole collection, of course, are the paintings of Rembrandt. Amsterdam is Rembrandt's town. We know where he lived, and there's several houses. We know all where his wives and his mistresses lived. We know where all his children were baptized and indeed, unfortunately, buried. We know all the streets he walked. We know all the brothels he went to. There is a way in which it's almost like, how should we say, you know, Manhattan has to be associated with Woody Allen and Paris has to be associated with Godard. The relationship between Rembrandt and Amsterdam very close. But again, the centre prize of their collection is not only, I think, about 50 Rembrandt paintings, but of course this most famous painting of all, The Night Watch. Some people say it's the fourth most famous, celebrated painting in the Western world. First of all, you'd have Mona Lisa. Second, you'd have the Sistine Chapel. Third, you'd have the Last Supper. And fourth, you'd have the Night Watch. Familiar to most people, probably from chocolate boxes and T-shirts, but of course, nonetheless, very celebrated painting. It's one of those high points of the High Baroque. We associate, I suppose, it's rather amazing, isn't it, that Caravaggio, Velázquez, Vermeer, Rembrandt, are all alive at the same time. Extraordinary flourishing of pictorial representation in association with the High Baroque. And there is a fascination for me too that the High Baroque, I suppose, is playing essentially with two phenomena. The first phenomenon is a world entirely manufactured by light. Rembrandt's major reputation is his ability to control and organize light. And the other phenomenon is the notion of the split second of time. You know, the famous Godardian notion that cinema is the truth, 24 frames a second. So most of these paintings by Velázquez, by Caravaggio, by Vermeer, by Rembrandt are about seconds of time. So in a curious way, these people, these guys, are all inventing cinema 400 years before the Lumière brothers on the 10th of December 1895. So obviously, as a proto-cinemast like myself, I'm deeply interested in the notion, certainly, of pushing back the origins of cinema much, much further. With that in mind, they suggested that I might be able to do something which would be related, I think, to two phenomena. First of all, to get people to look at the Night Watch all over again. Rembrandt is 400 years old this year, so it also helps to celebrate both Amsterdam, the Rijksmuseum, and Rembrandt. The basic idea, which was an extraordinary proposition, Mr. Greenaway, we trust you, we'll give you the Night Watch to play with for 2 months. Could you imagine that happening in any other country? I can't imagine it happening in the Louvre, it would never happen in the National Gallery. You know, the Dutch are very secular people, so we don't necessarily have to worry about religious connotations. These paintings aren't pilgrimages in the way, for example, the Last Supper would be a pilgrimage. But I have more to say about that in a minute, which is very positive. So the idea was to try and create something which would be along the lines, do you remember? Or maybe you don't, let me tell you. Picasso once said that the worst thing you can do to a painting is hang it on the wall, because within 3 days everybody's forgotten it. So there's an obligation, my obligation essentially was to get people to look at this phenomenon again with the eyes of 2006. So, considering then the split second of time and the notion of a world created by light, we devised a program. They gave us 2 very large rooms. The first one, we put on basically a show of ideas, highly subjective, about notions of how I could interpret the night watch. I don't know if any of you were here last year, but I gave my interpretation then. I also promised we were going to make a film. We still haven't finished started the Godard film yet, but I am told, with every good reason, that we should all be in Poland on the 3rd of September, and finally the film will begin. For those of you who weren't there, there's a conspiracy going on in the Night Watch, which involves a murder. You're all familiar with CSI, crime scene investigation. This is Rembrandt and crime scene investigation. So the whole film will be a postcard. And it was a demonstration that indeed, I think you can repeatedly see from these images, that a musket fire is shot, there's a bullet somewhere, where's that bullet going? And there's a suggestion that Rembrandt is sort of Sherlock Holmes and solves this mystery. Since he's a painter, he solves this mystery in paint. He's not going to write a text, he's not going to go to the police station, he's going to make a painting that explains the situation. And the film follows that trajectory. So in the first room, we introduced all the dramatic personalities of the characters and structured them together. Just as pause a minute so you can stop listening to my voice. Can we turn the sound up? And just watch this for a few minutes. It's not very long, just as a taste. Lots of nice sound, louder. Fascinations I have in terms of high baroque painting is the theatrical drama that's very much associated. There is a way in which the theatres are opening again in Calvinist Amsterdam after the ending of the 30 Years' War, and there's every evidence that certainly all painters would go and visit the theatre. And the major thing that's coming across is Jacobean drama, so people like Webster and Ford, "'Tis a Pity She's a Whore", Duchess of Malfi, all these are now being converted into Dutch and presented on the Dutch theatres, which are sprouting up everywhere. I have a feeling that certainly the Night Watch is really very much about a theatrical presentation. If you look at it, very shallow stage, all the characters are forward-looking, frontally presenting themselves to the audience, deeply artificially lit with a very dark background, and a sensation that everybody's coming up to the footlights to present themselves. So there's a way, I think, not only evident in this particular painting, but with the total oeuvre of Rembrandt, the sensation that he really is a man of the theatre. In order to encourage this, we rehung the Night Watch, which normally hangs in a special room inside the Rijksmuseum. We actually tilted it and organized it so it could be seen properly and didn't have all that camera shine.